Hello everybody, welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over all of the spoilers for Kaldheim that are uncommon or higher that have come out today and anything that came out late yesterday. Today's going to be a quicker video. It is Sunday and they generally do less spoilers on Sunday, and we are also approaching the end of spoiler season, but we still have a couple awesome cards to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about what I think about the cards, whether I think they will be viable, and what formats they're going to be used, all sorts of stuff like that. So why don't we just jump right into this? Starting off, we have Graven Lore. It's a 5-cost blue snow instant, and it says, scry X, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast this spell, then draw 3 cards. So, starting off, this is a 5 mana, draw 3 cards, which it's not amazing, but at instant speed, it definitely has, something going for it there. But the fact of the matter is, you're probably playing this in a deck that's running Snowlands. So you are probably scrying between because you're probably in 2 colors, you're probably throwing in red. I don't know why I'm saying probably so much, but you are maybe going to cast this, let's say, scry 4, draw 3. That's looking 7 cards deep for 5 mana. And unlike a lot of cards, you are actually getting 3 out of those 7 cards, and you could theoretically look 8 cards deep into your deck. And when you only have 60 card decks, that means it's fairly easy to go and get your combo pieces. And so, while I don't see this being necessarily like a meta card and something like Standard and Historic, if you're running a combo deck, you may definitely want to consider throwing this in, especially if you are running Snow already, as a way to kind of just dig for your pieces. If you're in a deck that cares about like drawing cards or scrying, it can also be pretty good. But outside of like Standard and stuff, I don't really see it seeing too much play. It is nice, the little scry edition, and maybe that is enough to push it into viability. I'm just not necessarily sure. I don't think this one's broken in any way, but I think it, in the right decks, could be very powerful. Next we have Immersion Skull Carrion. It's a land, and it enters the battlefield tapped, and then taps for black, and then you can pay 1 black and 2 red, and sacrifice it, and it deals 3 damage to target player. That player discards a card. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Again, all of these, I don't think there's been a single one that I have said is bad. I mean, it is a land at heart, and honestly, I compare these most often to Modal double-face cards. It's a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for 1 color. And then, so that's essentially the land part of a Zendikar Rising Modal double-face card. And then there's a spell that kind of lets you pay some mana and do the effect. The difference here is that it is a little bit delayed. You do have to wait a little bit to cast the spell, but the advantage is you can have it be a land at first and then the spell later. So yeah, I think this one's pretty good. I think every single one of these has made you at least go even with your opponent. What I mean by that is you are losing a card by doing this, but so is your opponent, and you're getting an effect out of it, and you used it as a land for a couple turns. I don't believe there's one so far that doesn't replace itself in some way, and this one replaces itself by actually making your opponent lose something. And so I definitely think this is an interesting card. If you are a deck that cares about your opponent discarding, could definitely see you justifying running this, but it really depends on your deck. Honestly, though, if you are running a deck and you don't care if you have like 2 or 3 lands in your deck that come in tapped, this is not an awful card at all, and I actually think a lot of these will see play. Next we have Selva Ice Shaper. It's a 3-cost, gruel-colored legendary snow creature troll warrior, 2/4, and you can pay 3 and tap and create a colorless snow artifact token named Icy Manalith. With tap, add 1 mana of any color. Alright, already kind of insane. I mean, this guy can for 3 mana create a Manalith, except it's also a snow artifact, so it's generating snow mana. But he can repeatedly do this, like every turn, and like 3 mana is a lot, and I will completely admit that. But you can instantly, by the way, activate the Snow Manalith. So you're essentially paying 2 mana, and you can do this every turn, 2 mana to create a mana rock, repeatedly. That's pretty good, but it does more. You can pay 8 mana, tap, and look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. May I mention, this is an uncommon. For the purposes of limited, this thing is insane. It's a mana dump that like ramps you and has no limit. It's not like you can run out of lands in your deck. Then it gives you a payoff for that mana ramp that involves just cheating things into play. Which you might be saying, well, once you have 8 mana, do you really need to cheat things into play? That's not the point. You don't even need to have the card in your hand. This is like a Golos, where the first ability is getting you the mana you need, and then the second ability is letting you use that mana. And I think this card is incredibly good, very interesting and, fun in a way. And yeah, I definitely think this is a very powerful uncommon, and I don't think anyone should overlook it just because it is an uncommon. The fact that the manaless enter the battlefield untapped is pretty crazy, and I don't know, this just seems insane to me. But maybe I'm horribly misjudging this card. Next, we have the Sky Massacre. This one was leaked a little bit ago, but it is a 3-cost black and red enchantment saga, and when it first ETBs, you get a 2/3 with Menace. And it's a Demon Berserker, by the way. So you essentially are getting a 2/3 for 3, but then also, whenever a Berserker attacks this turn, you draw a card and you lose a life. That's the turn after. And then you add a red for each Berserker you control, and until end of turn, you don't lose this mana steps and phases end. So you're getting a 2/3. You're drawing cards and you're getting mana. This card is perfect for Berserker and maybe especially Berserker decks. Not only because, like, even if you just had the 2/3 and then you drew a card and then you added 1 red mana, for 3 mana, that's a pretty good value. But if you throw this in a deck that has other Berserkers and you, like, draw 3 or 4 cards and then the next turn add, like, 5 mana, you can really do some crazy things for 3 mana. So, yeah, I definitely think that this is a very powerful card, and it should not be overlooked, like I said. These cards are cheap and powerful. And then we have Terraite Sanctum. It is a land. It taps for colorless, so it instantly just comes in as colorless. Then you can pay 2 and tap, and target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. So first off, this is pay 2 tap, put a counter on target legendary creature. But then it also becomes a god, so if that's relevant for like god tribal. And then you can pay 4 and tap and sacrifice it and put an indestructible counter on target god, which you cannot make something. Oh wait, never mind. Okay. This card, I missed it a little bit here. So it becomes a god not until end of turn. That it just becomes a god forever. So one turn you can pay 2 and tap and make something a god, and then the next turn you can sacrifice your Sanctum and make it indestructible. So first off, that's really good. I would not be surprised if this sees play in Commander, where you can kind of get your Commander down, turn it into a god, get it a little bit bigger, and then make it indestructible. It's colorless, it can go in any deck. Would not surprise me if this sees a lot of play in Commander. But I want to mention this one more time. We are now seeing ability counters not as like a mechanic of a set. That was Ikoria's, one of Ikoria's mechanics was ability counters. And they were like, this is unique to Ikoria. And I said back then, I was like, oh, this feels very much like Magic to me. And it would not surprise me if in the future we see them kind of become similar to, I don't know, +1/+1 counters. Maybe not as plentiful as +1/+1 counters, but the idea is it's something that is in every set. Or at least maybe not every set, but it is in more than just one set as a mechanic. It's something that can appear on just 2 or 3 cards in a set. And that's true. We've seen 2 cards currently that put flying counters, and now we have something that puts an indestructible counter. Yeah, very interesting to see those kind of return, and I wonder if we'll see that throughout the rest of this year as well, and I'm surprised they just really didn't talk about it. But in terms of this card specifically, indestructible counters are very, very powerful. I definitely see this going in a lot of commander decks. The ability to have a colorless land that can go on and give your commander indestructible just seems so good. Especially because, like, you might be saying, oh, but like, what if they blow it up after it becomes a god? Well, nothing is entitling you, or making you, I should say, have to sacrifice the Sanctum. It also, of course, if we're looking outside of Commander, the effect to turn them into gods. We have a couple god tribal cards, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I don't know, this card is just very... It can be used for many things. It can literally just be used to make a legendary creature indestructible over the course of 2 turns. It can be used to do god tribal things. It could even just be used for that, put a +1/+1 counter. I mean, I have a deck, it's Verazal. He is a kicker deck that, he can remove counters from himself to kind of duplicate kicker spells. That deck would love to have this, not to turn not to turn Verazal into a god, but just pay 2 mana, tap, and put a counter on something? Not an awful deal. So yeah, I definitely think this is a pretty good card that can see lots of play for many different reasons, and I do think the fact that it's not just flying counters. At first I was like, okay, maybe just flying counters. We're not going to see anything weird like double strike counters or indestructible counters, but no, we are seeing that, and so I think this really signals that they are just going to become part of design. This is like the second or third card that kind of permanently makes changes to a card that doesn't have a great way to keep track of it. I mean, like, okay, so Kaya, she gives abilities to cards. Now, she does put a counter on them, and the counter literally does nothing. The only reason it is there is to help remind you of the ability. But then we have this one, which target creature becomes a god. It doesn't say put a god counter on it. It just says they become a god, and you have to remember that. And there's another card that upgrades itself, and it's like it becomes an angel warrior. Well, you better hope that you remember that you upgraded it. And so a lot of these feel very digital focused, and I wonder if we're going to start to see even more cards that are like designed for digital in that way. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. I know it was only like 5 cards, but yeah, there were some very interesting ones. I think the indestructible counter could bring up a lot of interesting discussion. I want to know what you guys think about the return of ability mechanic counters. Yeah, I want to know all about that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.